Welcome, my friend, to Next Level Change Success. I'm Therese Perez, a change strategist and practitioner with over 20 years of experience designing and delivering impactful change programs across various industries. In this podcast, I share real-world practical strategies to help you create and deliver positive change experiences, whether you're a leader, practitioner, or someone looking to bring new ways of working to life. In today's fast-paced world, change is constant. Here we focus on how you can put people at the centre of your change strategy, because people with a sense of purpose are the most important link in driving performance. So if you're ready to create meaningful change and achieve all the success that comes with it, keep listening. Together, let's change the conversation and take it to the next level. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Next Level Change Success. My name is Therese Perez and I'm the founder of myvirtualchangemanager.com. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I am recording on Tharawal country and pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians on the land on which I am recording. So today I'm talking about change and communications. Now, I'm sure if you're a change practitioner listening to this, or even if you're a leader or a business lead in a project or program, you're probably thinking, well, change is communications. And oftentimes people do simply say that. Well, all we need with this change is a bit of communications and we should be right. We don't need a change manager on it. And in some ways that could be the case. But I'm going to take you through the challenges. What's the difference in change-related communications? Why is it important? How has it changed? Because it has changed in and of itself. What are the requirements for change communications? And when would it be acceptable that it just would be a communication issued from a change perspective? So the first thing to talk about is that communications is an information exchange. When we talk about information exchange, we're talking about sending and receiving a message. Oftentimes in communications, it's one way. And organizations can be really, really guilty of this, is that the CEO newsletter, well, that's a one-way conversation. When looking at briefings, workshops, that's a two-way collaborative communication. That channel is absolutely there for two-way communication. If you're setting up a Q&A mailbox, that's an avenue where there can be two-way communication. And certainly when leaders talk to their teams in their team meetings, it should be a two-way communication. Sometimes that's not the case, but it should be definitely a key communication channel. Most organisations' communication channels have never been reviewed. Some are really underbaked. So some do not have communication channels specifically for leaders, for example. And when it comes to change and change agility, you really do need to have particular communication channels just for people leaders so that you can have an appropriate communication experience where you are giving and receiving communication around the change that you're looking to introduce. You want to make sure there's enough time for leaders to engage with the communication that you're providing, and even the briefing packs that so many people issue to say for cascade to your teams. Well, if your leader doesn't understand that pack, what are they going to do? Just forward on the email and say, please read this, and if you have any questions, go to this mailbox and provide your feedback, which is really underbaked, insufficient for a change. Now, when we talk about change, and at what stage would it be acceptable that there's simply emails issued around a change? When there's only an awareness needed. So only when there's an FYI required, for FYI being for your information, and where there's no action required. Any other communication element that you provide should have a call to action, should be actionable, not just about the why and the what, but this is what you need to do, whether it be for team members or for people leaders. There should also be, obviously, the feedback element to all change-related communications, which says if you have any questions, reach out to, Or if you have any feedback, please provide it by, if there's a target date that you need to meet. And you also need to scope out, when we talk about communications and the change, if it's a very small operational change, which is specific to one team, doesn't have any flow-on impacts to any other teams, then you could just distribute an FYI email to everyone else. But then, of course, for that impacted team and that group, you do want detailed communication interventions. And you also might need training, obviously, briefings, workshops, the whole kit and caboodle, dependent upon what you're introducing. So sometimes it could just be contained, and then an email goes out for awareness for other teams. Communications has multiple challenges nowadays. Communications in the old days, I don't know when the old days were, but in the past, communication channels could get away with just email communication because it used to be innovative that there'd be an email sent out. But now we know that everyone digests information in different ways, so you want to make sure that your communication is multi-modal, so that you have video, you have the written, you might have the verbal. So whether that's a verbal video message from a leader with closed captions so that everyone can read it and I don't have to necessarily listen to it. There might be a panel discussion where people can ask their questions and they can get into vigorous discussions in those type of sessions, which is very applicable for some of the changes. And you might have a spokesperson talking to the change from a communication standpoint. If you've got externally impacted clients, customers, suppliers, there may be spokespeople in relation to the change for that, but there might also be engagement sessions. So oftentimes if there's community-oriented change, there will be community sessions and town halls available for people to have discussions, meet and greet, discuss the proposal, etc., etc. So all of these communication interventions need to happen for most changes now. And you need to get creative with your communication. So I talk about a call to action, but you also want to make sure that there's creativity within your change. Sometimes that's a catchphrase that you roll out. Sometimes that's a logo. That's a certain association that you might have with that project or program based on its title. There's all sorts of things that you can look at from a communication standpoint. And the important thing to consider is that there's a lot of clutter. Now, you don't want to overbake just as you don't want to underbake your communications, you also don't want to overbake it if it's only a small change and have it really promoted heavily if it's not actually required. Sometimes communication can take the form of contextual communication. So you might have communication or a prompt, for example, if someone opens the app and they're going in to, say, recruit. Then at the time they do that, there's communication at that point in time about the new changes, how the process works, etc. So you can integrate your communication points into the process change itself. I think that's sometimes the most effective when it comes to just-in-time communications. But one thing that we want to talk about with communications is it has to be consistent. The messages have to be consistent, that don't market your change internally, because else there'll be a sense of inauthenticity as a result of you almost trying to do a sales pitch to your internal stakeholders. You want to make sure it's real, it's operational, it's authentic, it's in a language of the people who are receiving it, and that it's contextualized to each business area dependent upon the impact to that business area. And what I mean by that is there's nothing worse, and you might have been in this position as well, there's nothing worse than if there's a change that's impacting you and your team, but you're hearing about it more from other people than you are from your own leader or that you are from the organisation. And that can be really painful and annoying, and it could also mean that you get so disenchanted that it breaches your trust with the organisation. And if you're a very dedicated employee, you can really erode that sense of trust and loyalty if there is a change that's impacting you the most, yet you're not getting communicated to about it. So it is quite critical that you do consider making sure that those who are impacted the most are communicated to the most and with respect, so that the change can be adopted, it can be successfully adopted and that you can move through that change process as fast as possible. Another thing to talk about is in relation to not just consistency, but the rhythm of your communications. And from a change perspective, you should see that your communication frequency increases closer to go live, and then it just doesn't stop and fall off a cliff. It actually continues on through the embedment phase, and for at least a month, doing reinforcement, communicating, really gathering feedback, because once you've gone live, you get the most amount of feedback. And if you haven't had engagement prior to that time, you absolutely are once you've gone live with the change. So you want to keep feeding that information back to the business and back to leaders so they know how you're maybe rectifying issues, resolving issues, and continue to embed and then celebrate success as you go through your change. And that's really quite critical from a communication standpoint. So you want to ensure that communication continues through and that you have the resource and support to do that post go live so that you do close that feedback loop. Because remember, communication's a two-way conversation. And the other thing to mention in relation to communications is that you want to give it time to mature. If you need to adjust the message, if you need to change the message, it's really important to have the ears on the ground after you start your communication through to the organisation, if it's an enterprise-wide change, and really make sure that the language you're using, the context you're using, the framing that you're using is resonating with people, because you don't want to, and sometimes you don't know until you actually issue the messages. Sometimes things can be misinterpreted, or there might be questions coming through where you realise that even your tagline isn't really resonating, or it's confusing for people. So once you get that feedback, don't hesitate to change direction a little bit, change a bit of tact so that you can make sure that the messaging is clear, people understand it, people can engage with it. And if you hear that feedback, the faster you shift in your thinking and approach, the better the outcomes will be. So I hope that this gives you a bit of an idea around the criticality of communications when it comes to your change. And from an impact perspective, when you're looking at a change, and I talked about if there's a very small contained change, then you might get away with an email. But there's nothing better than the leadership aspect, the role modelling aspect, giving leaders enough time to engage with the change so that then they can move through it with their people and do that on a regular basis, because we know most organisations, if not all, are changing all the time. And so if you have those communication channels set up for your leaders, if they're working really well, if they're very engaging for the leaders, they're going to prioritise that because they know that the information they're getting is really important for them to do their job and to ensure that their team is successful in adopting the change and that everyone can move through that change process as fast as possible. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're finding these valuable, please leave a rating, and also any feedback. We're up for it. That's what communication's all about, right? So this shouldn't be a one-sided conversation. Please come to my virtualchangemanager.com, reach out. I'm also on LinkedIn, also on Facebook and Instagram. And you can reach out, have a conversation with me, and I hope that you're enjoying the content. And we're also on YouTube, so you can see me on YouTube as well, talking multi-modal. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and just remember that change matters because your people matter. Hi, it's Therese here again. I just wanted to mention that we have the Change Intelligence webinar series happening this year, and you don't want to miss out on any of the topics that we're going to cover. It's a live webinar series talking about change resilience, change frameworks, connected thinking, how you can change your mindset and the mindset of others, behavioural change and what that can offer. If you don't want to miss out, then come to myvirtualchangemanager.com. Just simply register and we'll let you know when the next webinars are happening so that you can come along. Spaces are limited, so be sure to jump across and register as soon as you can, and you'll see some of the topics that we're going to cover. I hope to see you there and to continue to work with you to create positive change experiences.